Imagine a place with no water, no gold, really no hope. A town of just dust and isolation.
Pretty bleak.
And now, imagine a man rising from that literal dust to become one of the most powerful people in America. That's the paradox of Harry Reid.
Right. A man known for these ruthless, bare-knuckled tactics.
But also for huge legislative achievements. So it begs the question, was he a savior of the Senate, or was he the architect of its dysfunction?
It's a massive question, and to answer it, you really have to look past the headlines, get into the mechanics of power.
We're going to get right into that machinery today. But first, a quick note. You're experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation, powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic book analysis.
It's a fascinating way to break down a text like this.
It really is. And here's our plan for this deep dive. Enjoy a bold new take on book coverage with this extended analysis. It's more than just a summary, though we do include that too.
Yeah.
This is about how the author shapes their argument, builds influence, and earns, or maybe loses, your trust.
Giving you the tools to read with, I think, sharper insight.
Exactly. Should you read this book? This should help. It's also great for aspiring writers. And if you find this format valuable, we'd love to hear from you. Your feedback really does guide our future content.
So today, we are diving into the game changer, how Harry Reid remade the rules and showed Democrats how to fight. Published just recently, January 2026, by Jon Ralston.
And this is a big deal because it's the first full biography of the late senator since he passed away. But we're not just recapping his life, are we? This feels bigger.
Oh, absolutely. It's a study of power, yes, but it's also a study of institutional dysfunction.
Yeah.
Ralston is trying to show us how the Senate became a battlefield, and he's using Reid as the lens.
Okay, so before we buy into Ralston's whole thesis, we have to talk about Ralston himself. The first question is always ethos. Why trust this writer? I see biography of a powerful politician, and I immediately think, puff piece.
That's a healthy skepticism to have. But Ralston is an interesting choice for a very counterintuitive reason. On paper, he has the credentials.
35 years in Nevada journalism, founder of the Nevada Independent.
Right. He knows the terrain. But here's the twist, the thing that makes his credibility so compelling. Harry Reid absolutely hated him.
Hated him. Like, won't return his calls. Hated him.
Worse. I mean, it was deeply adversarial. The book mentions Reid tried to get Ralston fired. Repeatedly.
Seriously?
And he actually succeeded once. He got Ralston's statewide TV program canceled. He actively tried to destroy the author's livelihood.
Wow. Okay, wait. So if the subject of the book got the author fired, how does that make the book more credible? Wouldn't he just be out for revenge? I'd be worried about a hatchet job.
And that's the paradox. This bad blood, as Ralston puts it, actually strengthens the book's credibility. It proves independence.
I see.
Because you, the reader, know that Ralston was a target. You know this isn't going to be some sanitized hero worship version of history. It creates this necessary objective distance.
Well, if Ralston gives Reid credit for something, you know it's earned.
You know it's really earned because he is certainly not doing him any favors.
That's a really strong point. It's almost like, I know where the bodies are buried because I was almost one of them.
Precisely. And his current role with the Nevada Independent, a nonprofit, nonpartisan outlet, just cements that integrity. He's approaching this not as a friend and not really as an enemy anymore, but as a witness.
Okay, so we can trust the messenger. Let's talk about the story. How does Ralston make us care? Because let's be honest, Harry Reid was not known for his charisma. He was dry, he mumbled.
Not exactly Obama giving a soaring speech.
Not at all.
That's where the rhetorical strategy comes in, specifically pathos, the emotional appeal. Ralston leans so heavily into the origin story. We mentioned Searchlight, Nevada, but the details are what matter.
It wasn't just a small town.
No, it was a destitute mining camp. The book mentions he was the son of a brothel laundress.
Right.
His father was a hard rock miner who took his own life. His mother washed clothes for the local brothels. That's the archetypal American success story, but so much grittier. Ralston just paints this picture of extreme poverty to generate empathy.
It makes him human before he becomes a Senate tactician.
Exactly. But then, and this is the really clever part, Ralston juxtaposes that empathy against Reid's later ruthlessness. He uses those origins to explain the behavior. The argument is you become bare-knuckled because you had to fight just to survive Searchlight.
You learn survival, not polite debate.
You learn survival, and I love that term, bare-knuckled. I noticed the analysis points out specific word choices like that. Take no prisoners, Machiavellian.
That's the diction and framing. Ralston's being very intentional there.
He is. He's framing politics not as public service, but as combat, as warfare. The title itself, the game changer, it sets this whole thing up. It tells you from the jump. This man altered how the war is fought.
So if the premise is he changed the game, how does Ralston prove it? We need the receipts, we need the logos, the logic, the evidence.
And this is where the book shifts from biography into, well, political science. Ralston structures it chronologically, sure, but he anchors the whole narrative on these specific microcosms.
Small events that prove a broader point.
Yes. Give us an example of one of these. What's a moment that really defines the Reid style?
The most cinematic one is probably his time on the Gaming Commission.
Oh, this is back in the Vegas days, before the Senate.
Right. Late 70s, Reid was the chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission when the mob still had a heavy influence in Vegas. He wasn't just pushing paper. He was battling organized crime. And this was not a figurative battle.
No, literal. There was a car bomb. It was found on his family station wagon. Death threats. Ralston uses this chapter to establish the thesis that Reid was, quote, willing to do what no one else would do.
That sets up a powerful comparison. If you can stare down the mob, staring down a filibuster in the Senate must feel different.
It trivializes the scary parts of Washington. But let's look at a political microcosm. The analysis highlights the 2010 Senate race. This is just a masterclass in what Ralston means by game change.
Right, 2010, the Tea Party wave. Reid was majority leader. He was super unpopular. The economy was terrible. He should have lost.
By all conventional logic, he should have lost. But Ralston breaks down how Reid won. It wasn't by becoming more likable. It was by making his opponent, Sharon Angle, less likable.
There was that one moment, the comment about chickens and healthcare.
A gaffe, a weird soundbite, and most politicians would mention it once, then move on.
Reid didn't move on.
He weaponized it. He spent millions defining her by that single comment, just relentlessly disqualifying her. Ralston uses this to show how Reid understood modern political warfare. He turned the tide not by inspiring hope, but by executing a ruthless, tactical demolition of his opponent.
It's that win-at-all-costs mentality. Reminds me of the Arlen Specter story, too.
The party switch, another huge piece of evidence.
For listeners who don't remember, Specter was a Republican senator.
From Pennsylvania, correct.
Right.
And Reid needed his vote to get to 60, the magic number to pass the Affordable Care Act. Ralston just breaks down the maneuvering. Reid didn't just ask nicely. He promised Specter seniority. He cleared the primary field for him.
He engineered the whole thing. And that's the logos here. Ralston is showing us that big historical changes, like healthcare reform, didn't happen because of magic.
They happened because Harry Reid knew how to pull levers other people didn't even know were there.
Or were too afraid to pull, like with Yucca Mountain.
The nuclear waste dump. That was supposed to be a done deal. The federal government wanted to put all this waste in Nevada.
And Reid just stopped it.
Single-handedly. He cut funding, blocked appointments, used every procedural chokehold imaginable. Ralston presents these stories as proof of a specific kind of genius, one that leverages deep procedural knowledge to beat much larger forces.
It really paints a picture of someone who treated the Senate rulebook like a weapon.
Precisely. And that brings us to the most complex and, frankly, the most controversial part of the book.
Hold that thought. Before we get into the heavy institutional analysis, we want to mention Mindful Moments, our YouTube channel offering AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques inspiring reflection and rational thought. It's a great resource if you want to keep learning.
Indeed. So back to the institutional analysis. This is where Ralston's argument really becomes a double-edged sword.
Right, because you can't talk about Harry Reid without talking about the Senate rules.
Right.
And this is where the book dives into the nuclear option.
It does. And to his credit, Ralston adopts a very balanced analytical tone here. He notes that Reid inspired both loyalty and derision. But the core argument, the logos, revolves around the consequences of Reid's actions on the filibuster.
Let's just clarify that for everyone. In 2013, Reid changed the rules, so you only needed a simple majority, not 60 votes, to confirm most judicial nominees.
Yes. He did it to break a Republican blockade of Obama's judges. He felt he had no other choice. The government was paralyzed.
But Ralston draws a direct causal chain from that decision to, well, to the future.
To what happened later with the Supreme Court, exactly. The analysis argues that by breaking that norm in 2013, Reid paved the way for Mitch McConnell to use the exact same tactic for Supreme Court justices under Donald Trump.
He connected the dots.
He did. Reid's tactical innovation enabled his opponents to use those same tools to reshape the court for a generation.
That's a tough pill to swallow for his supporters, I imagine. The ultimate law of unintended consequences.
And that's why the book is so fascinating. It forces you to look at that trade-off. Ralston doesn't say the court appointments were good or bad. He just reports on the mechanism. He argues Reid's short-term effectiveness created a massive long-term vulnerability.
So, looking at the subtitle again, showed Democrats how to fight. That sounds a bit like advice. Does that reveal a bias?
It's a valid question. The analysis points out that while Ralston is clear-eyed about the flaws, that subtitle definitely suggests a functional purpose. It implies the book is a lesson manual.
A how-to guide for political combat.
Kind of, yeah. It functions as a strategic manual as much as a history. It's saying to one party, this is how you wield power. So while Ralston is objective about Reid's personality, the whole framework assumes that fighting this way is something to be studied and maybe even emulated.
It raises the question, is politics about consensus, or is it about winning? And it seems Reid's answer was unequivocally winning.
And that's the tension the reader has to sit with. Ralston doesn't resolve it for you. He lays out the victories and he lays out the cost, the eroded norms, the polarization.
So who should actually read this? Is it just for political junkies?
Well, the primary audience is certainly politically engaged readers. If you're interested in how Nevada went from a red state to a blue state, this is the definitive text. Reid built the machine that made that happen.
The Reid machine.
The Reid machine. It's a blueprint for state-level organization.
And what about for writers? You mentioned them earlier.
Oh, absolutely. The secondary audience is aspiring writers or historians. It is a masterclass in how to structure a political biography, how Ralston balances the personal stories like the car bomb with the big institutional changes. It's just beautifully done. He makes Senate rules feel like a thriller.
Is there a downside? I've heard some say it's a bit local.
That's the main critique, that it's very Nevada-centric. If you're not into the details of Nevada insider politics, some chapters might feel a little dense.
But you need that context.
You absolutely do. The analysis argues you can't understand his method in Washington without understanding the environment he came from.
It's the crucible that forged him. You can't understand the senator without the searchlight boy.
Exactly. Local politics was the training ground for the national stage.
Okay, let's pull back for the bigger picture. We have this man who came from nothing, fought the mob, ran the Senate, changed the rules. What's the final verdict the book leaves us with?
It leaves us with a provocative question about our institutions. Did Harry Reid save the Senate by modernizing its tactics and actually getting things done? Or did he break the institution by removing its safeguards?
The classic debate between effectiveness and tradition.
And Ralston gives no easy answer. He shows you the cost of both. He forces you to decide if effectiveness justifies dysfunction. If you want to pass laws in this era, do you have to break the rules? Reid said yes, and the consequences of that yes are what we're all living with today.
That is a heavy thought to end on. It makes you realize the rules of the game aren't static. They're written by the people willing to fight the hardest.
And usually by the people willing to do what no one else will.
Fascinating stuff. This book really peels back the curtain on how modern power actually works. Not just how we wish it did.
It certainly does. A stark reminder that history is shaped by individuals.
Well, that is about all the time we have for this deep dive into The Game Changer. If you want to understand the machinery of the modern Senate, this seems like a must-read.
Agreed. Whether you admire him or not, his impact is just undeniable.
Click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally. See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.